This week, a special election took place in Georgia's 6th congressional district, and even though the National Democratic Party had largely given the cold shoulder to progressive Democratic contenders in other special elections, such as Rob Quist in Montana or James Thompson in Kansas, they really cared about this election, and this was the one election where they wanted to draw a line in the sand and really make an effort to win and make it a referendum on Donald Trump. So this was really important to them. Now, the Democratic contender in this particular race was Jon Ossoff. Now, he was facing off against Republican extremist Karen Handel, and even though this particular district has gone to Republicans for decades, it wasn't an unwinnable district by any stretch of the imagination. So, for example, Jon Ossoff outraised Karen Handel by a 5-to-1 margin, making it the most expensive House race in American history. He was also ahead of her in the polls just days before the election took place. The race also garnered national media attention, and during the general election, Hillary Clinton actually nearly won this district and was just a 1.5 behind Trump. But most importantly, this was a winnable district because the Republican contender was so awful, so incompetent, that during a live televised debate, she literally said this:
I do not support a livable wage.
I do not support a livable wage.
Yeah, so when you take all of these facts into consideration, this was not an unwinnable district. In fact, I think that Jon Ossoff should have been the favorite to win. However, did he win overall? Well, as you all know, he didn't just lose this race, but he actually underperformed Hillary Clinton. He lost by nearly 4 points with 48.1% of the vote, while Karen Handel won with 51.9% of the vote. Now, let me remind you that Hillary Clinton only lost this district by a 1.5. She received 46.8% of the vote to Trump's 48.3% of the vote. So in what was a winnable race, Jon Ossoff performed so poorly that Democrats actually lost ground in this district. And now, members of the Democratic Party are so angered by this loss that some are now calling for the ousting of Nancy Pelosi as a result.
We need a winning strategy. And I think the first step to getting to a winning strategy is a change in leadership.
So the question is, how did Jon Ossoff lose so badly? How did the Democratic Party actually lose ground when you compare this special election to the general election? I mean, he underperformed Hillary Clinton. That's got to say something about Jon Ossoff, right? Well, it says a lot. Jon Ossoff was a horrible candidate. So not only did he oppose tax increases on the wealthy, he literally said that he would fight against movement towards a single-payer healthcare system. So he was not a progressive. In fact, he wasn't even a liberal. He was a neoliberal centrist. And not only that, he also had no policy substance, but he was a terrible candidate, and he ran one of the worst campaigns I've seen, perhaps since Hillary Clinton. But apparently his campaign was worse because he actually performed worse than Hillary Clinton did. So to kind of give you an example as to what type of campaign Jon Ossoff ran, this is literally one of the ads that he chose to run. So, needless to say, he ran a terrible campaign, and as a result, the Democratic Party's base in this district was not galvanized to come out and support him, and that's because he chose to run as a Republican light candidate, and as a result, turnout was low, so only 58% of eligible voters chose to participate in the election. And I'll repeat myself, I say this probably every week, but when turnout is low, Republicans win. When turnout is high, Democrats win. Basically, winning an election comes down to Democrats galvanizing their core base, but they failed to do that here. Jon Ossoff excited nobody. He was just marginally better than his Republican opponent, and 9 times out of 10, if you give someone the option of a Republican and Republican light, they'll most likely opt for the Republican. But Democrats are incapable of learning their lesson. They think that because this is a traditionally Republican district that they actually need to run to the right. But if anything, Democrats should be running as populists even more in these types of districts because progressive policies are supported by a majority of the country. And populism is what excites your base. So if you can get out all of the Democratic voters or left-leaning independents in this particular district, you can win. So if anything, you don't run to the right in these districts because you need your base here more than ever. But they chose to stay home because Jon Ossoff wasn't really offering them anything different than Karen Handel. He was marginally better. So just being simply a little bit less shitty than the Republican, it never ends well for Democrats, but they just refuse to learn their lesson. If you run as a true progressive, you improve your odds. We've seen this time and again. And as this tweet shows, progressives like James Thompson and Rob Quist actually performed better than Hillary Clinton in their districts, while Ossoff, a neoliberal centrist, actually performed worse than Hillary Clinton. And it's possible that Quist and Thompson would have won if the DNC actually put as much effort into supporting their campaigns as they did into Jon Ossoff's. Now, to add to that argument, Brent Badowski of The Hill writes, National Democrats did not lose the 4 special elections for House seats since President Trump was elected. They surrendered 3 without a fight in Montana, South Carolina, and Kansas, and ran a campaign in Georgia that was shallow, risk-averse, and content-free. Democrats win elections by increasing the electorate, registering new voters in large numbers, and building a powerful, unprecedented get-out-the-vote machine for a party that acts like a movement and cause, not merely a collection of consultants making small fortunes through massive television buys for losing Democrats. But even though it's abundantly clear to most of us why Jon Ossoff lost, well, the Democratic Party, they're kind of sitting here scratching their heads now because they have no clue why he lost. They thought that since they funneled millions of dollars into his campaign, even though he was a terrible candidate, he would still win. So now I'm sitting here, just laughing, watching them try to come up with excuses. So for example, Rachel Maddow on MSNBC, a Democratic Party propagandist, tried to blame his loss on the weather. I'm not joking.
If there was a turnout effect from the bad weather today in the district, does that have any partisan implications that you could foresee in terms of what was expected for same-day, election day voting in here rather than the early vote?
But Rachel Maddow isn't alone in not knowing why Jon Ossoff lost, because Senate Democrat Chris Murphy, he speculated that, well, maybe if he focused a little bit more on Trump like they do, then he would have won. I mean, it's not that Hillary Clinton already tried this strategy and lost, but, let's hear what he has to say.
I am amongst those who doesn't think we should read too much into this, especially because whether it was the right decision or the wrong decision, Ossoff decided not to make Trump the central focus of that race. And listen, Republicans are going to do enormous political damage to themselves if they proceed with this health care bill. I think the American public still thinks this is theoretical. They're still not sure that Republicans actually are going to jack up everybody's rates by 20%, take insurance from 23 million people in order to pass along a tax cut to the very wealthy. I think if they actually go through with this, it may be the end of their special election run.
Now, when it comes to a different Senate Democrat like Kirsten Gillibrand, Hillary Clinton's mini-me, she also had no idea why Jon Ossoff lost, and she decided to, instead of, answering the question, to just pivot to platitudes.
First of all, any insight, takeaways, what we can learn from what happened in Georgia?
Well, to me, it means we need a 50-state strategy, and we need to run tough candidates all across this country because people are fired up and they want to be heard and they want things to change. So I think we can run candidates in districts all across the country, and I think we should fight really hard to flip the House.
Brilliant analysis there, Kirsten. I think that, a 50-state strategy is currently what they're doing, right? Because they're trying to win in Georgia. So she really had nothing of substance to add to the conversation. But prior to this election, Bernie Sanders was on CNN, And he talked about Jon Ossoff and how he wanted Jon Ossoff to win, but basically he admitted that Jon Ossoff doesn't actually have what it takes to win this election.
You know, that is a particular district in Georgia, a conservative district, been held by Republicans for several decades. But what I also believe is if the Democratic Party is going to turn around its fortune, it's going to have to mobilize people at the grassroots level in 50 states in this country. It needs a progressive agenda to say that we have to raise the minimum wage to a living wage, that we have to join the rest of the industrialized world and guarantee health care to all people as a right, in my view, through a Medicare for all single-payer program, that we have got to deal in a very fundamental way with climate change, transform our energy system away from fossil fuel, pay equity for women. I think if the Democrats are going to be successful, they need a strong progressive agenda that gets working people and young people involved in the political process.
Yeah, so obviously Jon Ossoff failed to do just that. And it's frustrating to me because Bernie Sanders has given Democrats a blueprint on how to run a successful campaign. Bernie made up a 60-point deficit, he was unknown, and he almost defeated Hillary Clinton in a rigged primary. So he's given them this gift on how to run a good campaign and not lose every single time to Republicans, but they fail to listen to anything he has to say. And while Democrats are currently completely clueless and frustrated as to why Jon Ossoff lost, I want them to be educated by someone like Nina Turner, who lays out exactly why he lost.
That district is very much a Republican stronghold. I think also the message is that people are not looking for folks to run Republican light. Either you are going to run on the values of the Democratic Party, be authentic about those principles and those values, or you're not. But people don't want a substitute for the real thing. Again, if you want to run as a Republican, run as a Republican. You know, I think Einstein defined insanity when he said it's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Again, the Democrats really need to do an autopsy, Paul J. I really do believe that. And I don't know what it's going to take. You know, I was quoted in the New York Times saying that the Democratic Party hashtag not woke yet. And that is still my hashtag on Wednesday. After that election. And then the Republicans have won 6 of the last special elections, even with someone like Mr. Trump in the White House, who has, what, a 35% approval rating at this point in the country, that we can see even some of the erosion from his own base at this point in June of 2017, and Republicans still won 6 of the last special elections. Hashtag not woke yet Democrats. And I don't know what it's going to take.
Yeah, I don't either, Nina. I think that this strategy where they continuously run to the right in red districts, it's led to their complete annihilation. I mean, they've lost 1,000 seats in legislatures across the country, and they still continue to do this same exact strategy. So I think that at this point, the party is hopeless. Unless it just gets completely taken over by Justice Democrats, there's no hope. And we need to also be pushing for a People's Party who is just unabashedly progressive, and they're so progressive that they force the Democratic Party to move back to the left. Otherwise, they'll start losing ground to the People's Party. So something's got to change. Like I said, they've been calling for the ousting of Nancy Pelosi, but if you think they're going to get anyone better than Nancy Pelosi, I believe Steny Hoyer is next in line. So, I mean, they're completely clueless, but the answer is simple. One, you do have to change your leadership, but don't put up Nancy Pelosi's mini-me like Steny Hoyer. Put up a true progressive in a leadership position. And second of all, just start running progressive candidates. If you are a neoliberal Republican light, your base isn't going to come out to support you. And the Republican voters aren't going to be lured in by this fake Republican. They're just going to vote for the actual Republican. I don't understand why they can't get this.
Support this podcast by joining the independent progressive media revolution today at humanistreport.com.